So my name's Steve Chambers. I've been invited here today to talk to you about Microsoft's cloud strategy. So what I want to do is I want to first of all take you through some very transparent thinking about Microsoft. If you've worked with Microsoft for 5, 10 more years, I want to shatter that thinking a little bit because Microsoft is a changing place, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I want to explain about how partners are first-class citizens in our cloud strategy, go through it in some depth to show you exactly what it is, and then close with some programs about how you can engage, much like Chris did at the end of his, through partner programs. And I do want to emphasize that there's going to be a survey at the end of this, and there are going to be some questions in there which really help us follow up with you. So if you want to spend some time with the Ara team and with Microsoft, we'd love for you to do that and note that in the survey. So probably a little bit of an introduction. So Chris and I were just talking before the presentation. For the last 10 years, I've been working either for VMware or for VMware joint ventures. And this is my first quarter at Microsoft. So it's been a very, very interesting journey, interesting change. Nice to see the old VMware slides. So why did I change? Well, the CloudOS strategy starts with this guy. I had a joke with Satya. I don't think it went down very well. I said, you know, Satya, if you were Blackpool Rock and we cut you in half, it said cloud and service provider. And he's like, what's Blackpool Rock? Right? So he's a big, deep thinker, Satya. A quick question, and the ladies in the room don't have to answer this question, but was anybody born after 1976? So you guys are younger than Microsoft. Can you believe that? Even some ladies answered that question. I couldn't believe that I found out Microsoft is 40 years old next year. Satya's been there 22 years, but he's only the third CEO we've had in all of that time. Now, Satya's quite different from Steve Ballmer. I'm so glad he didn't do a video of Steve dancing around the screen shouting, I love software and I love this company. He's very funny, he's very emotional. We saw him on stage just recently at Atlanta, and very, very emotional guy, loves the company, but Satya is very, very different. And you can see he's different in the difference that he's changed in the company. Now, Satya started the cloud services at Microsoft. And we've been doing this for 2 decades now. So we've got all the consumer cloud services and the enterprise cloud services. And what Satya's done is introduce this concept of mobile to Microsoft. Everything's got to be mobile and cloud. So before, when you deal with Microsoft and it's lots of different business units, there's now one Microsoft, one cloud strategy, and it's with this guy. It's not with lots of different business units, it's all led up to him. So I think that's quite different from how Microsoft worked before. So the most important thing that Satya drives through the company, and it's reflected in hopefully everyone you meet at Microsoft, is that it all starts with the customers. Now, when we talk to customers about cloud, we don't really talk about t-shirt sizes. We don't talk about software-defined yada yada and stuff like that. We try and think and ask the customers to say, what would your cloud look like? What do you want the cloud to look like? When we tend to talk in grown-up terms about the cloud, these are the kind of things that customers come back with as they say, you know, if I'm a bank, I want the new tellers to be able to be productive straight away. I want the tools to be in their hands straight away. I want to engage with my customers in a different way. I want to use the new social, the whole world of social and digital. I want to be able to do that. I think that's cloud. Data. The companies have got silos of locked up data. They've also, a lot of companies are using software as a service applications, and they're creating data silos as they go. And there's a lot of products that are building up to look after things like Boomi, that Dell have bought, to kind of break down these silos. So data insight is really important. And of course, the thing that all of us, I think, are familiar with is the whole cloud platform piece. You want it to be scalable for seasonality and all the different things that a flexible cloud platform gives you. So we begin with the customer, and this is how we built the cloud strategy. And when we look at partners, so we looked at this survey from Morgan Stanley, 150 CIOs across UK and US. I think there's 2 really interesting points on this slide. One is how, and I think Steve alluded to this at the start, is how service provider is increasing and increasing. If you look at the numbers, it goes from about 30% to 40% today. And that's a mixture of public and hosted. And in fact, you could look at this slide differently and you could say hybrid cloud is going to get bigger and bigger. And I think both previous speakers have announced that today. So the market is growing, especially for the audience here today. And I thought, I wonder what the total budget was of those 150 CIOs if you add it all together, and what is the size of the prize? You can look at any of the big analysts. This one's from IDC. Sorry, it's difficult to see it. But when they're looking at successful cloud partners, these are the kind of numbers they're talking about. Be interesting to know what the UK number is. It'll still be measured in billions, but I just wonder how much. Definitely a big prize to win. And looking backwards, we've been working with partners for a long time. Microsoft wouldn't have been able to do all of these numbers without partners. But the goal of today to tell you about the cloud strategy is less about what's happened and more about what we can do. But I have to say, when I hear the word strategy, I think, oh, it's one of these kind of 3 to 5 year things. You know, things are going to be available next year. But this is stuff that's available today. So what I'm going to tell you about today is what we're doing today. But it's what the strategy really, when I use that word, I mean to say it's exactly what all of Microsoft's doing together. So for us, partnering is really simple. We make markets together. We take markets together. I'll be showing you the programs at the end and the server provider license agreements and ways to make money together. And we, of course, like every good vendor, working through distribution, we have various levels of partner models. So the more you play, the more we pay. Really, really simple. And this is an example of a successful and happy partner. And I would love people in this room to be saying the same thing in 3, 6, 12 months. I do look at you all and I think, how many of you will be saying the same thing? I'm really glad I went to that presentation that Steve did. I'm really glad I worked with RO because we've all been making money and doing well in the UK. That's really one of my goals for today. So, what is the Cloud OS? Now, as I alluded to before, when we talk to customers about it, we explain to what it is. We don't talk about software-defined networks. We don't really talk about types of OSs. We don't talk about things like that. We talk about what does it mean for you. And this is not some kind of, you know, soft, fluffy way of describing the cloud. This resonates with customers. It's worked with people in the city who've swapped wholesale to Microsoft, both on-premise, through partners and Azure. Customers are interested in, get me new channels, get me new customers, make my staff more productive. The data growth, so this top bit is the real business conversation we have, but it's still a small part of our business at Microsoft. I'm not privy to tell you what the numbers are, but this is a small but rapidly growing area. I think for service providers, I would love to see people in the room playing in this area because that is the huge growth area. It's absolutely on fire. Whether it's SQL, and when I think of SQL and I think of the old Microsoft, I think, well, that's not very exciting. It's a massive growth area, especially through service providers, through SPLA. We've got a lot of products in our cloud. We don't think cloud is just infrastructure as a service. We also look at things like Dynamics. Partners can syndicate Office 365. You can make money out of that today. There are lots of products we've got in Cloud OS that partners can make money out of. Platform is a kind of obvious one. I'm comfortable in that. As I said, I've got a VMware background. I've done a stint at Cisco, and I've been doing this thing for a long time. So that's a kind of given. Here's the benefits for the IT companies that we speak to. So if you're talking to the IT pros at a customer, or if you, to be honest, one of the examples I'm going to give you of Paul Smith, this is where they see a lot of traditional service providers playing. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's more than that. There's all this as well. So I'd be really curious to look at the demographics in this room to work out which one of you play well in here traditionally, and are any of you wanting to play in some different areas. So whichever bit the customer's interested in, and you'll see from the examples, they tend to be interested in at least these two. Platforms and productivity is really, really, really popular. Connect my workforce together. Help me access customers in a different way. Unlock my data and give me on a cloud platform. Resonates with all customers. That. But what we do say to customers is, if you want to piecemeal this together yourself with different products in the market, and there are a lot of products on the market, and it'll probably take you 3 years to evaluate them all and decide which, then connecting them all together is also a very difficult thing. So customers want, when they're sold on this idea, they want the service provider to be able to give them it very quickly. So products have got to work together, be very connected. We're also asking customers, don't make the cloud bend you. So don't you bend with the wind. How can we configure the cloud to suit your, I mean, you tell me how many businesses are exactly the same, even within a market segment, whether it's retail, manufacturing, and Formula One, which is an example I'm going to give you, they're all quite different. So the cloud's got to be configurable, okay? One size fits all is not a rule that works here in the cloud. Might work in consumer world, less so in the enterprise. Familiar tools. If you're asking a customer to take on a cloud, take on a new service, it really helps if it's a familiar interface, familiar product set, a familiar brand. That helps the selling cycle. And if a customer's going to trust you to run a service, and this is no surprise to service providers, it's got to, if they trust you and they're giving over their applications and their data and they're plugging their colleagues and their customers into what you're offering, it's got to have all the security and all the other enterprise bells and whistles. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into what Cloud OS is, and I want to start with the deployment models. So we have 4 models. There's only 3 shown here, but the 4th one, of course, is hybrid. So part of the strategy that Satya set out, he said we have to have one consistent platform across all 3 deployment models, and if people do hybrid. So if you look at a product like System Center, it can manage on-premise, hybrid, it can link in with providers, it can link in with Azure, and it looks the same. So Hyper-V runs across them all, it looks the same. If we're asking people to deploy different software and it to behave different ways, Chris already pointed out why that's difficult. If you want to move workloads around or even offer different service levels, it's very difficult. So the one consistent platform is very important, and that really resonates with customers. And when you break that apart, and it's a bit more computer science and techie now, when we talk to customers about cloud, virtualization is just one small part of it, right? It gives you the fluidity of resource management, which is great, and I think people are familiar with that from the server consolidation days. But it's not the be-all and end-all. Identity is huge in the cloud. Identity, federated identity, every conversation we have, our partners need to understand identity in the cloud. If you're using SaaS applications, if you're using their own applications, if you're using Yammer or CRM or whatever it is, single sign-on is crucial. Multi-factor authentication is crucial. That is huge in the cloud. And the data platform, there's a lot of data providers out there want to put a unique and different data platform on top of a cloud that wasn't built for data. We don't think that works that well. Data is often overlooked. People think compute, storage, yep, that's the cloud, but data is more and more in there. And then the 2 audiences. So we've got the traditional IT management guys, so having that consistent management screen across on-premise, service provider. If you're a service provider just offering a service and you're using Azure and your own premises, so today for Azure, we've got data centers in Ireland and in the Netherlands. A lot of our customers, and I can think of 7 good reasons why they would want a UK presence. So we need service providers to provide that in the UK. Usual things like data sovereignty. Quite funny, we know the big vote that's coming up next week. We were asked by a customer last week, I need a data center in England or Wales. So it's going to be quite interesting how the whole devolution piece is going to change. And development, so one of the interesting things is the app developers who've perhaps been using the cloud the longest. I mean, they tend to have been the source of shadow IT, using Amazon with their corporate credit card, deploying their applications, bypassing security. For example, with Visual Studio now, we can get developers using their IDE. They can go straight through to Azure or through to whichever target cloud's in there. So whole new way of working for people to consume, but they're the key characteristics as part of the Cloud OS. Breaking it down a little bit more, here's some of the products. So I haven't put everything on here, otherwise it would be just a whole cluttered picture of product icons. But these are the kind of base platforms. So in that blue piece you saw at the bottom about the platform, we've got Hyper-V as our hypervisor, you've got Windows Server. Hyper-V is a free download in case you're not familiar with it. It's just a role that works in Windows Server. System Center, the 2012 number at the end of these products is really important. Now when I joined Microsoft, I was still thinking about 2008 products, which I'll be honest weren't very good. 2012 was a huge leap forward. So if you're thinking about Microsoft Cloud as Hyper-V as it was in 2008, I'm going to ask you to change your thinking because it is totally different. And I can give you demos and other things afterwards to show you why it is different. System Center has come up on leaps and bounds. I know in the old days this was like many CDs, long deployments, long and complex. I even heard a rumor that it could take 9 months of services engagements to get this thing working. Well, now you can automate it in less than 2 hours. And you can see there's something called the deployment toolkit. You can see this at TVP. So things have changed a lot. I want to quickly go through some examples because I think, you know, the impact on customers is really what it's all about. And I really want you to think about the customers you work with and do any of these apply to you. So pick some of the different productivity areas. Metrobank first, well, one of the first new banks in 100 years on the high street. Pick some of these bullet points out. They like to surprise and delight both their employees and their customers. And they're using that with new technology in the cloud that they can do really quickly. None of this working out, well, which kit do I have to buy and which data center am I going to put it in? Those days have gone. This is quick. And this is what I love. Net promoter scores. Which business doesn't like net promoter scores? People are recommending. When you go into a Metro Bank, you get great customer service. All the data is at the hand of the teller. None of these antiquated mainframe systems that I used to use in the 90s at Bank of Scotland. This is much more cool. Different example, Patagonia, they've got distributed workforce all over big spread out geographies. They worked with a partner to glue all these people together. Again, if they wanted to do that, they would have to, without the cloud, be thinking, well, which data center do we put them in? Let's evaluate the products. They glue them together pretty quickly with Office 365 online. I mean, who would have thought Microsoft would have ever allowed Microsoft Office 365 to be sold online by subscription? A few years ago, that would never have happened. Who would have thought Microsoft would have done a partnership with Salesforce? That would never happen before. Satya's making a change with things like that. It's a different place. Very exciting day at Thames Valley Park, our headquarters yesterday, because Lotus rolled in a Formula One car. I wish I could have got in it, but that was impossible. So, and they had some very handsome Formula One drivers, so it was very popular in the office yesterday. But Lotus are a really good customer of ours. If you watched Monza at the weekend, you'll appreciate how much data is used in a Formula One event. One of the interesting things that cloud's changing with Formula One is, you think about all the kit they have to take around from race course to race course. Well, these days, they really just take their endpoints around. All their data and their applications are in the cloud. So they turn up, plug them in to the network, and all their data and telemetry is available from the factory. So the cloud is really changing how these guys work. And of course, the big thing for Lotus, they're not the biggest team in F1. We all know that, right? I don't think that stands for lots of trouble, usually serious anymore. I think they're pretty reliable cars. But they don't have the budget to compete against the big boys like Mercedes and Ferrari. So working with Microsoft in the cloud with partners, they're getting the same kind of intelligence but for a much lower price. Very familiar example. So again, platform, I think you all know this, right? Cloud platforms, they are more agile. They can be lower cost, okay? But if you still use cloud platforms the way you used to do things, like a little bit like leaving all the lights on in your house. If you leave all the lights on in your house, it's going to cost you some money. But you can turn applications on and off, use them between 9 and 5. Working with a partner, what Paul Smith were able to do was to focus on retail and fashion instead of being an IT provider. It's a trend that I've seen. I mean, I remember working in the city probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and there was a fashion to become an internal service provider. I don't think that worked for a lot of people, because you probably appreciate running a service is a little bit more different than being an internal IT guy. Focusing on SLAs, understanding the cost of things, uptime, change control, all those things, they're not always natural to folks. So using Microsoft Cloud with a partner really freed up Paul Smith, nice example. But my favorite example, going forward, is EasyJet. So this was highlighted in Computer Weekly. The interesting thing about this example, they used our platform as a service to basically, each of these boxes represents 3 different systems at the back end at EasyJet. So they had a problem in that they wanted to introduce this bit. They wanted to give customers and their agents the ability to let people pick their own seats. Now, if they'd have done it the old way, they'd have had to access some of these old legacy systems using old code, try and work out how to edit them and change them. But instead, they used Microsoft Azure and our platform as a service to rapidly create this new window and glue it all together. They did this, I can't remember how many days it took them, but they did it very quickly. But the most impressive thing was the impact on the business. So by introducing that quickly, they increased revenue per seat by 7%. Very compelling to a board who are willing to spend money on Microsoft Cloud and service provider partners. It's a great example. Read that in Computer Weekly. So, I just want to quickly recap that you've seen Satya drives our strategy. It is one strategy across all of Microsoft. Partners are front and center, and CloudOS Network is one of the programs that you can use to be a part of Microsoft's cloud. I do encourage you to spend some time with Arrow and me at the end of this session and through the survey to let me know if you're interested in this. Much like VMware's service provider program, it's much the same thing. Keep pressing the wrong button. We have a service provider license agreement, so the products I showed you that are part of the CloudOS, you can get them pay as you go and build your business with ease. Very straightforward. Arrow have got experts in these things, so they can help guide you through that and what's applicable to you. And the amount of money that Microsoft invests in partners is incredible. I say it's my first quarter, and I've seen how they work. All the programs, the go-to-market, the investment funds that they will offer you to win business, because Microsoft's about growing, it's about changing, it's about taking market, but more importantly, making new markets. So I'm really interested to know today, out of all of you that's here, what innovative ideas you might have to work with Microsoft in the cloud in the UK. So anything else you want to talk about? you've got the Arrow team here. I'm going to make a personal commitment that if you talk to Microsoft and you need some help, we'll work with Arrow. But if you need me, I'm steve.chambers@microsoft.com. Rebecca's another great contact there. You can contact her, and we're here to help you out.